Hi, hello. So, if you're like me, you watched Netflix reboot of the Winx series about 5 times, and I have a lot of thoughts and a few theories. So, let's get into them. So, first of all, things that I loved. I loved the first episode. I love the exposition. It was really great, super seamless. Like sometimes these things, especially when you're presenting a whole new world and universe, can feel really bulky and forced. This was really well executed. The dialogue was great. There was like that one line about like mansplaining and like binary and spectrum that felt a little bit too forceful. Like they were trying to be a little bit too Gen Z. It felt like millennials writing, pretending what like thinking of what Gen Zers would say. So that felt a little bit too forced, but otherwise, very great dialogue. The fact that they have cell phones, I thought was a little bit weird. Like, why does AT&T have cell towers in Solaria? That doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but whatever. Production was great, but generally Netflix does a really good job with that. Like Sabrina, for example, the reboot for Sabrina, that was really great production, but the dialogue and the plot was shitty. This was not the case here. Production, dialogue, and plot were all great here in Winx, so that was great. I also like how they gave the characters time to develop into the role that they wanted for them. So, like if Bloom and Sky are supposed to be love interests, right? But they don't make them all lovey-dovey and like madly into each other from the get-go. So like I love this scene where Bloom literally is like, "Sky, I just met you yesterday. Like I don't think anything of you." I thought that was great. I also have a theory that this Netflix remake is inspired by Scottish history and folklore. So first of all, which I love, I think that's a great aesthetic. So first of all, the stone circle that they have for their classroom, et cetera, in the Winx world, is very common in Scotland. I'm sure they have stone circles in other places of the world, but they're kind of a big deal in Scotland specifically. Changelings, also part of Scottish folklore, and Beatrix and Bloom are both redheads, and the story of Asterdell is sort of a similar one of Scotland, that was invaded and then destroyed by the British. Like, I see a few similarities there. And most importantly, Beatrix, who is from Asterdell, so given my theory, Asterdell is supposed to represent the destruction of Scotland, right? So Beatrix, who is from Asterdell, was rocking a lot of tartan. Tartan is a typical Scottish type of cloth that looks like flannel, and she wore that quite a bit. So I definitely feel like there's some sort of like Scottish influence here. All right, let's dive into the characters. So first, Musa. I want to start off by talking about race here. So I know that there's been some controversy because Musa in the show, in the original series, is presumed to be Chinese, and Alicia Applebaum is only a quarter Singaporean. I've read somewhere that she might also be half, but the details are really hazy. I'm not sure on that. Either way, definitely could have done better. But I really do feel conflicted, though, because yes, they should have cast an Asian actress, but Alicia's performance is probably one of my favorite ones in the whole show. So my hope is that since they're being all loosey-goosey with the staying true to the original series in terms of race and casting, etc., maybe they'll make Tekna Asian, or maybe they'll make her Islander, or maybe, you know, they if they're going to use that liberty, then they can use it on some of the white characters that haven't come in yet. Anyway, that might be a nice idea. I'm not sure. Now let's talk about her power change. So, as you all know, in the original series, Musa has a power of music. So, as I mentioned earlier, my theory is that Netflix took a lot of inspiration from Scottish folklore. Magic there is very nature-oriented. So that is why I think that they opted out for the music thing. Like, music magic isn't really a thing based on what I know. The mind magic, I could see that being slightly more consistent with Scottish folklore and sort of just Wicca in general. Like the mind, there is a lot of like meditation that needs to happen and stuff like that. So that makes sense to me. Also, plot-wise, her power as a mind fairy is super useful. Like, she discovers that there's something wrong at the assembly. She realized that the burned one is not dead yet. She discovers that Stella had been hiding. All these things. So, definitely very useful in terms of plot. And now, finally, the main reason I think that they went for a Mind Fairy and not the music thing, is that they wanted someone who was very moody, very overly stimulated by all these emotions, this sort of emo empath thing she's got going on, because the show is basically about their friendships and how they're all really different from each other, but they complement each other in really great ways, especially the roommate. So we have Musa versus Tara, we have Bloom versus Aisha, so there's some sort of yin and yang stuff going on. So if Tara overshares and she has all these feelings and she's this bubbly person, she's always talking about stories of her childhood and stuff, Musa is very secretive, she's really closed off, she's gonna be really moody. We only get snippets of her childhood, we don't know much about her, we only get like little hints here and there. Flip side also, if Tara is this sort of powerful fairy in combat and she's very calm and collected in moments of stress, she knows exactly what to do, then Musa is going to be quote-unquote useless in combat and she gets overwhelmed really easily. So I'm thinking specifically of the finale where, the final scene where Sam is hurt and she quickly gets overwhelmed and she just has to leave even though the guy she loves is dying. Okay. In terms of what I think her character arc is going to be. So clearly, Musa's damaged from the stuff that happened with her family and her mom. She's frustrated during training because she feels like she can't help, the same way that she couldn't help her mom when she died. She hates being an empath because of all the things she has to feel. She can't process her own emotions because she's forced to feel everyone else's. And I think in the next seasons, we are going to learn a lot more about Musa's past and why she is the way she is. And most importantly, I think we're going to see her grow from it. So you see in the final episode when she uses her power to help Sam, she realizes that there is something that she can do. She can be useful with her power. So she's going to learn that her power isn't a curse, and she's going to feel more at peace with herself. Now, in terms of love interests, so, I love Sam, but I just don't think he's going to stick around. In the original series, Riven is actually Musa's boyfriend. So Riven in the Netflix version is moody and angry the same way that the original Riven is. So I don't think it's a coincidence that they brought him onto the Netflix version, kept his moodiness, and then made Musa equally emo. I don't think it's a coincidence that they had like that 40-second scene with just them two, and there was definitely some sort of sexual tension in there for sure. And finally, let's not forget that Riven mentions how he was homies with Tara last year. So here we have both Musa and Riven that need people like Tara and Sam in their lives to help them deal with some of their shit. So my theory is that Musa is going to go through this character arc. She's going to figure herself out. She's going to start using her empath powers to in a more proactive way, and she's going to feel better about herself, and then she's going to use those powers to help Riven out of his own angst as well. So they're going to grow into better people together, but obviously with Musa with a little bit of a head start for sure. Now let's move on to Tara. Again, I want to start off with the race question. So I know that people are really upset that Tara is white. I'm not super upset with it because Tara isn't Flora, and I am I'm like 99% sure. I would be surprised if they didn't bring in Flora next season. They're just gonna bring her in later. There's plenty of characters that they're gonna bring in later as well. Like Timmy's not in there. We talked about Tekna being not being there. Brandon isn't there. Like there's a lot of characters that haven't made the cut in this first season. Aisha comes in later in the original Winx. She's not part of the OG crew in the original series. So they're just definitely messing with the order of entries. And I'm really sure they're going to bring in Flora. So I don't really think, and I would be really surprised if they whitewashed her. That would just be stupid on their part. They really shouldn't do that. If they do that, then that's an issue. But anyway, in the meantime, I really love Tara's character. So for starters, the actress's performance is already awesome. But she also had a really great script to work with. So Tara totally fucks with the whole like big girl archetype thing. So she's chubby, right? So therefore she must be harmless, right? But Netflix was like, nah, fuck that. She doesn't, but also she really doesn't need to be a bitch to show that she's powerful. So she proves that you can like flowers and you can drink chamomile tea and you can be sweet and still be a badass and you can still be strong and you can still be level-headed. Like, let's look at all the times that Tara's like really adorable, talking about like these really cute stories about her childhood, etc., and she loves her plants, all that jazz. But then she knows exactly what to do in high-stress situations. She's the most level-headed one. Like, for example, she's the one who always has to remind everyone that Beatrix is literally a murderer. She's the most powerful in terms of actually causing damage during a fight. But she doesn't sacrifice her kindness to do so. So anyway, she's awesome. 10 out of 10. Big fan. Now let's move on to Aisha. In terms of Precious's performance, it was fine. It was fine. But she also really didn't have a whole lot to work with. Because just what I mean by that is that her character was really unidimensional. Sort of this standard control freak reaching her breaking point, goody two shoes, etc., etc. There isn't really 100 different ways to play that. So I know that she's supposed to be a contrast to Bloom's sort of fiery, spontaneous, impulsive behavior. But it just kind of, they didn't really dig into her character too much in this season. So it didn't leave a lot of room for Precious to show us what she was capable of. In terms of acting. But I want to talk a little bit more about the contrasts. So obviously we've got the whole water versus fire thing. We have Aisha literally putting out Bloom's fire with her water. She's like, in other words, Aisha constantly cleaning up Bloom's mess when her flames are out of control or any other stupid idea she might have. There's also the whole like Bloom not trusting the staff of Althea, and then Aisha is always going to tell them exactly what's going on whenever they're in trouble. But now let's talk about her character arc. I don't think that Aisha's sort of boring, stuck-up persona is all there is to it. So in the original series, Aisha is a princess. And I think that they kept that detail in the Netflix version too. They just didn't tell us yet. So first of all, here's why. First, Aisha is really focused on having a good relationship with Bloom. Even like Musa at some point points out that it's really weird that she's so focused on having a good relationship with Bloom and with her new roommate. Like, why is that so important to her? And Aisha mentions really early on that having roommates is new to her and she just really wants it to go well. I thought that was kind of a weird thing to say. So obviously the sweet thing is new to everyone, so why bring that up? Maybe it's because her upbringing was different from a normal one. I.e. maybe a royal upbringing, maybe because she lived in a castle without any actual homies. Also, at some point, when Bloom loses Stella's ring, Stella tells Aisha to tell Bloom what a screw-up that was to lose it. Why did she ask Aisha? Is it because Aisha is also royalty and would know what a big deal that is? Also, we should note how both Aisha and Stella have a problem with control and appearing perfect. So that sounds like princess pressure to me. Also, I wanted to point out that Aisha is slightly jealous of Bloom's natural power. Aisha, as a princess, has probably been told to be powerful the same way that Stella was. So those are some sort of hints that I've collected throughout this first season, so I'm excited for them to reveal that in season 2, if I am right. Generally speaking, I think that Aisha is going to learn not to feel the pressures of always needing to be in control. Like, I think that's going to be her character arc. And eventually she's finally going to access her power of Morphix. So in the original series, that's her power, right? Like, Aisha can create anything from the water molecules around her, etc. And in the Netflix version, Miss Dowling tries to teach them how to find the control of what fights to be amorphous, i.e. water, right? And then Aisha messes up that assignment. Her water goes exploding everywhere. So her arc is probably going to be about discovering and understanding that power and having a sort of healthy relationship with control. And I'm also going to say that I think that her and Bloom's relationship is probably going to be one of the most mutually beneficial ones. Whereas for like Tara and Musa, for example, like I think Musa is going to benefit most from a relationship with Tara, and Tara not necessarily benefiting that much from having a relationship with Musa. But here I think Bloom and Aisha are really going to be good for each other in a really equal way. Okay, let's move on to Stella. First, in terms of Hannah's performance, it was also meh. So she has a theater background from what I understand, and I feel like that sort of exaggerated form of acting kind of shone through a little bit. And then also, which is, I don't know, it was fine, I guess, but it was just like a little bit too much. Her character is also one of the most stereotypical ones, so it's hard to do like a really impressive job when you have like a really basic character to work with. I'm really sad that they made Stella into this like typical picture perfect mean girl. Like, obviously she's a princess, so she has to have all this pressure from her mom to be perfect. Like, that's already been done. I really liked in the original how she and Bloom were like biffles from the start. I like that just because Stella cared about what she wears and she's this blonde princess who looks great all the time, it doesn't mean that she can't still be a homie. I guess that they needed to make all the characters sort of like broken somehow so that they could grow later on, but this just seemed like a little bit too obvious. So anyway, that's lazy writing. I do like, however, how having the power of light means that you can like control what people see, which is linked to appearance, and it explains like Queen Luna's obsession with how powerful Stella is supposed to seem to her classmates, so that's cool, I guess, but other than that, meh. In terms of her character arc, I feel like that one's pretty obvious. She's going to learn how to love herself, make solid friendships with the girls, not rely on people like Sky to fix her problems, etc. I'm hoping that they're only going to introduce Brandon, who is her fiance in the original series. I'm hoping they're only going to introduce him when she's learned that you don't need a boyfriend to keep you from falling. Like, once she's found herself really, then we can bring him in. That's what I'm hoping. Okay, now Bloom. Abby, great performance. I think it was pretty easy for her because I think her actual personality is pretty similar to Bloom's. Like, she's very spirited, she's really goofy and spontaneous and stuff. I like how they didn't write her as the whole, like, damsel in distress thing. Like, she doesn't need Sky to fix her. She doesn't need his sweater when it's cold. Like, she's a fire fairy. Like, she's fine. She can make her own heat. So, that I like. Next, let's move on to Beatrix. Okay, this is probably my least favorite performance. Not because Sadie, that's the actress's name, not because Sadie was given a unidimensional character like Precious had and Hannah had. I think that the character herself is actually pretty interesting. I like how she's this sort of like woke villain, like she's calling Riven out for being a bully. She calls him out for like not being about consent and stuff. Like, that's great. Like, I think that's really cool. But Sadie sort of played her in like a really obvious way, like especially in the scene where she's in the cell. She's giving off this very straightforward villain vibes, which is fine, I guess, but it's just kind of disappointing. Doesn't make for a very strong performance. I also don't particularly think that she's Bloom's sister. I know a lot of people think that, especially because they're both redheads. I think that she's one of the blood witches of Asterdell, because after all, her character is based on the Trick sisters from the original series, who are witches. So that makes sense. Okay, that's all. Thanks for watching, guys. Let me know in the comments if you guys have any other theories, if you guys agree or disagree with some of my thoughts. Let me know. Love to discuss about this. Bye.